Welcome to part 3 of creating visual movie effects in Blender. In this video I'll be showing you how to create a split screen effect, which of course is an effect where you can merge together two versions of the same shot. Often what this is used for is putting an actor on two different sides of the screen at the same time with a hidden dividing line running down the middle of the shot. So we'll be creating that effect in this video. If you've not seen part 1 and part 2 of this video series, I put links to both of those on the screen right now and in the description below. You can click on the playlist of this video series. In part 1 I talked about how to video edit in Blender, and in part 2 we created a setup which allowed us to do color grading, adjusting all the brightness and contrast and hue and saturation and color balance and all those sorts of things. Let's go ahead and jump in. I'll click on my splash screen to get rid of it. Before I started doing this screen recording, I actually filmed my own footage with a camera, which is a Canon T3i digital SLR camera in video mode, and I shot my footage on a tripod. Now, that's very important for a split screen effect. You need an absolutely perfectly still camera. In fact, I just pressed record and I didn't even pause it or stop it. I just kept on filming and shot every single one, so I wouldn't even have to bump my camera one little bit. Let's go ahead and bring the footage into Blender. Of course, we don't do that in this 3D view window. I'm going to change this window type down here into a video sequence editor. Now, in order to get a split screen to work, you need two clips or two scenes that are the exact same length in Blender. So what we have to do first actually is bring in my big long video file and only keep the parts that I want to keep. In other words, both versions of my scene have to be the same length and number of frames. We're going to export those into a video file and then bring them back in into our node editor window. So let's go ahead and quickly get through this first part. I'm going to make this sequencer window into a viewer and a sequencer by clicking on this little button down here. And I'll go to add movie, and my movie file is on my desktop and it's right there. It's just from my digital camera, and I'll click on add movie strip. I'm not going to worry about audio in this video at all because I don't want to deal with that for the sake of the length of this video. So I'm going to select the audio, the green strip, and press X or delete on my keyboard. So now if I press home on my keyboard, it'll actually zoom out so I can see the entire thing. This is a very long, several minutes long video file. There I pressed home. So what I'll do is I'll scrub through it and you'll kind of see what's happening here. I did a few versions of each take. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm not going to include myself coming in and sitting down. I'll zoom a little bit there. I'm not going to include the sitting down part because what I didn't realize, or I wasn't quite sure how it would turn out, is that these cushions, you'll see in a minute that I come and sit on the other side wearing different clothing. The middle cushion moves quite a bit, so we're not going to get a perfect discrete line or edge going through the middle of the scene. I'll try my best, but we'll see. So I'm not going to include the part where I sit down because that is the part that makes it move. So I'm going to start it right about there. I'm going to select this strip, and with the playhead in the right spot where I want to start this scene, I'm going to press K on my keyboard, and the K key, if I go to strip, it is a cut. It's a soft cut, which means we'll be able to change it a little bit later if we want. So I'll press K on my keyboard. It splits the selected clip into two. I don't need this first part anymore, so I'll press X on my keyboard and erase. Let's go ahead and select that by right-clicking, not on the handle, just in the middle of it, and I'll press G on my keyboard to grab it, and I'll move it down to about frame 1. I'll zoom in by scrolling up and just correct that. Now this is probably going to be about 600 or 700 frames long by the time I've done what I need to do. I'm not going to keep myself getting up at the end. Right about there, I'll press K on my keyboard to make another soft cut. Let's keep going. I'll find the next take that I want to use. I did 2 takes of each side, so I kind of skipped past the first take. I want to use the second take of myself. So right about there we'll start. I'll press K on my keyboard to do a soft cut. I'll select the middle part and I'll delete it. I'll select that part by right-clicking, of course, and I'll grab it with the G key and put it onto channel 2, and there we go. I need to zoom in to get more accuracy there. I want to make sure they line up so they are the same length. And so let's see if I'm still watching the TV at that point. No, I'm not. I start to get up, which is not what I want. So I'll have the option here of just trimming both down to where I want them to be, or so they both have me sitting in it and not getting up or anything like that. So I'll just actually split that with the K on the same frame, and I can get rid of the rest of it. So now I have nothing else there. I can press the home key and it zooms in. I might zoom out a little bit. And so I have myself twice, and it's the same length of clip. That's important because now I'm going to export each of these as its own video file, and then we'll bring these video files into the node setup, because not only are we going to do a split screen, but we can also do color adjusting or color grading after we make the split screen effect to really sell it. Okay, let's go ahead and export each one. I'm going to select the top one. What I have to do actually is go to the very last frame, because my timeline is not the right length. I can use my arrow keys as well. And I'm at frame 541 here. And so what I'll do is with my mouse in this window, I could just type in 541, or I could put my mouse in the timeline and press E. And that extends the end value to wherever my playhead is. The beginning would work as well. I could put my playhead and press I believe it's S, and that would set the start value to whatever frame my playhead was at, but in this case it's correct already, it's frame 1. Alright, let's go ahead and export our movie. I could export to a series of PNG image files or JPEG image files, and that might work a little bit better with Blender. Blender doesn't like video files very much, but I'm just going to use a video file for the sake of this video. So I'm going to change my output type to H.264, which allows me to change the encoding of my video. I want an MPEG-4 or an MP4 video with H.264 that codec. Okay, let's go ahead and set my output location. I'm just going to save to my desktop, and I'm going to call this one, I believe the one I'm working on right now is where I'm wearing a black shirt split. Or scene. Sure. And I'll click on accept, and I'm going to make sure my resolution is the right size, not 50% but 100%, and I'll click on animation. Alright, so let's finish rendering out to a movie file the black shirt version of this scene. So with my mouse in this window, I'll press escape to go back to the sequencer and the viewer. And I don't need this strip anymore, but I will keep it. I'll just hide it with the H key on my keyboard. And so now I'm scrubbing through and I can see the green shirt version of the scene. I want to export that as a video file. So over here under Output, under the Camera tab, I'll just change this right here to green. And I'll press Enter. And so now that's the correct output. And I'll go ahead and press Animation again. Alright, so let's finish rendering out both versions of the scene. At this point, with my mouse in this large window, I'll press escape on my keyboard. I could actually just delete these two strips right now, but what I would suggest, if you've already put in the work to figure out what parts of your footage you want to use, I would actually save this Blender file so you can come back to it later on if you need to. But in this case, I'm just going to quit Blender and open up a new file. Yes, I do really want to quit. I now have two versions of this scene, the green shirt and the black shirt versions, plus the original version, the longer movie file direct from my camera. Let's go ahead and go back into Blender. And I'm going to change my window type from a 3D view to a node editor window. We're actually going to combine two video clips that we just created in the node editor window, which of course means we need to change our mode here to compositing nodes. So I'll click on this little stacked photo button, and I have to click on use nodes as well as backdrop. Let's go ahead and zoom in. And as you learned in the last video in which we talked about color grading, and I'll put a link to that video on the screen right now if you didn't check out part 2 of this video series. In that video we talked about using different color nodes like RGB curves and brightness and contrast and color balance. And we use these nodes, an input. In this case we have render layers, which we don't want. We want to bring in a movie file. We actually want to bring in two movie files. And so this is a very similar process as in the last video. We'll be connecting nodes together using what are called these noodles, these wires or curved lines. And you'll need a flow from your input nodes. In this case, we'll bring in 2 movie files to your composite, which is your output or saving. It gives you the ability to render out a movie file at the end when you're finished. So let's go ahead and select render layers, and I'll press X on my keyboard to delete it. I'll press Shift A to bring up the add menu, and I'm going to add our input. We're importing a couple of different movie clips, so I'll put that right there on the left, and I'll click on Open. And I'll go to my desktop and I'll find one of those 2 clips. I'll pick the green one first. Doesn't really matter. I'm going to zoom out a little bit by scrolling, and I'll duplicate this node. Shift D on your keyboard is the duplicate keyboard shortcut. That's Shift D, and I'll change which movie clip we're bringing in. In this one, in this case, we're bringing in the black shirt version. There we go. I have to connect them up to my composite, but the way that you actually combine 2 movie clips into one is using a node called alpha over. So I'm going to go ahead and add that. Of course, you can use the add menu to add nodes, but I'll be using Shift A. It's the same thing. You'll find alpha over, and again, I know that these categories are confusing and there's lots of nodes available. It's just sort of a process of memorization. Alpha over is under color, which seems a little bit odd because it's meant for combining things together, but it's under color. I really think it should be under like matte or something like that, but no, it's under color. There we go, the alpha over, and as you can see, it has 2 input ports. This is perfect because we're combining 2 videos together, and it has an output port. Just a note here, when you have yellow ports, what that means is that it's expecting you to plug in from another yellow port. Usually it'll be an image. That's what the yellow dot means. It means a color image. And the gray ports, with the gray circles, they represent black and white images, which often can include things like masks, which we'll see in a second. So I'm going to combine using the alpha over, just by clicking and dragging from one port to the other with your left mouse button, and I'll connect this one up too. So now actually my backdrop in this window. We checked on backdrop, so I'll need to press Shift A. I'm going to make an output viewer node under output. There we go. And I'll connect that up. There we go. And notice that the viewer has a yellow port to circle as well, which means it's expecting a color image. Okay, so there is the backdrop in this window. You'll see that it actually puts the bottom port, the image port on the bottom of the alpha over node on top. If I switch these around, it kind of switches them for me. I can just drag from one to the next. And so it puts the green one on the visual because the bottom one kind of goes on top. It's kind of backwards to what you would think, but I'll leave it with a black shirt on top. We need to now create what's called a mask. And a mask is basically a black and white image that specifies for a given video or image file. The black stands for area in the image that will get cut away from the applied to, or what the mask is applied to, image. So if I have a black and white image and the right half is white, and that mask is applied to this image, so the right half would be white and the left half would be black, and I apply it to this image, it would actually cut off or make transparent the black area. The black is called a mask, which is an old photography term for developing photographs, and you could actually do this in a dark room. Let's go ahead and create a mask, and we have to do that in one of two windows. I'm not going to get rid of this window though, I want to keep it, so I'll actually just divide this big window into two by grabbing this little cross-hatched area, and if I left click in that little area and drag to the left with my mouse and keep holding, I split my window into two, so now I can change this window type over to we have two options here. We can create masks in the movie clip editor or the UV image editor. In this case, I'm going to go to the movie clip editor. And we haven't used this window before in actually any of my video series, at least not for the last 5 or 6 years or so. So what you do here is you bring in your video file again, and it should be available to us just down here, not under open, but actually in the already opened shortcut list. I'm going to bring in the black shirt image because that's the one on top. We want to cut away or create a mask for this image so that we can see the green shirt version on the left hand side. So to create a mask in this window, it's actually just like a process of connecting the dots to create a line. Kind of like making a Bezier curve or something like that in a program like Inkscape or Adobe Illustrator, something like that. So to create a mask, we have to switch out this window's mode from tracking over to mask mode. And once I've done that, I can click on this new button and it'll create a new mask. I'm going to name it. So I'm going to call this one split screen dash mask. You can name it anything you like. Now we don't actually get a mask right away. We have to create it from scratch. And the way you do that is you hold Control down on your keyboard and then you can left click to start creating that vector or connect the dots line. So I'm actually going to pick where it makes sense to make a line is there's going to be some reflections on this side of my table of me wearing a green shirt. So I'm actually going to cut it off right kind of around these objects which I place on the table knowing that there would have to be a line there. So I'm going to hold Control and left click right there to create a point, and I'm going to trace the edge of things as best as I can. You can scroll up and then orbit by pressing your mouse wheel down to kind of pan around. And I'll hold Control again and left click, and I'll go right there following that edge. Now it's in this area that we're going to run into some problems because the couch cushions actually move when both of me sit down in the different takes. So we're going to have a hard time getting a good split screen right there. And that's my mistake in not maybe duct taping down that cushion or choosing this couch scene to do this example on. So we're not going to get a perfect result here. Let's keep holding Control and clicking. I'm going to go right there maybe, and then right there. I can pan up. There we go. And I'm going to go off the edge of the screen, and I'm going to make another point, Control left click, and one right there as well. Now, your first instinct might be to close this mask, to go to this point and to Control and click to make sure it's a closed loop, but that's actually not necessary. You don't even need to do this next part, but what I might do is I might go to Mask and toggle cyclic, which is Alt-C. That'll make the two ends close, but that means you can also undo it later. So it's up to you if you want to do that or not. It doesn't really matter. One thing I will do though is I want to actually show you what the mask looks like, and I can't quite remember where that is. Over here in our properties panel, which you can get to by pressing N on your keyboard or that little plus. It might be under this mask display section. Is it called overlay? Yes, it is. This is what the mask will actually look like. We've created the white, the keeping portion of the mask, which means the version where I'm wearing black will be the part that will remain from the clip that I apply this mask to, and the black section will become transparent, which will let me see my green shirt version through. We don't actually need to keep it like that, but it's just sort of interesting to see. I'll uncheck overlay in a sec. What I have to do now is actually apply this mask back over in my node editor window so we can actually see the result, and we'll adjust it after that. So I'll put my mouse over the dividing line between the two windows and drag that over. In fact, I'll press T and then N to hide those panels, and N again to hide that panel. We're going to plug a new mask node into the factor of this alpha over, which is expecting a black and white image or a grayscale image, which is exactly what we have over here, the mask. So I'll press Shift A on my keyboard because I'm going to add a new mask node, and it's actually under input. You can think of input as bringing in something from somewhere else. In this case, we're bringing a mask in from another window, or we already have it saved somewhere else in this Blender file. So input, mask, and I'll click right there, and I'll drag this port to this port, and it doesn't have a mask yet, which means it actually considered the entire thing black. So what I'll do is I'll select a mask that I've already created. This will show you a list of the ones that you already have. And let's go ahead and see if this is going to work for us. Okay, after scrubbing a little bit, it actually does show me the other version. Notice that my head is being cut off here, and that's because our render resolution is actually set to 50%. This video is at 1920 by 1080, and it is approximately 24 frames per second. That's the settings that I use on my camera, but if I turn this up to 100, you'll see I might have to scrub a little bit around. There we go. I'm now using the entire image. That's a little funny quirk of Blender. I'm going to just kind of pan these nodes over so you can see the result. It's not looking too bad. I'll press V on my keyboard, but we have these issues where the couch, because I sat down on both sides and it moved it in different ways, I don't have a very even edge there, and you can see the difference in the darkness because of my shadow. So how can I resolve this? Well, masks not only can be black and white, but they can have a grayscale as well. That means they can have 256 shades of black and white and gray. So what I can actually do here is Blender's masks allow you to feather. And the way you create a feather, a blur, a gradient between the black and white is you hold Shift on your keyboard, and then you can left click and drag on the edge of your mask. So I'm going to hold Shift and then left click and drag over here, and it's going to allow me to pull that mask, that secondary mask feather green line, in this case inward. Now you might have a different experience. If I actually undo that, or I'll go to mask and clear feather weight, if I hold Shift you should be able to drag it outwards, but I'm not sure why. It just sort of depends on the direction that it first thinks that you're drawing the mask in. This will not work. My feather right now is not really working because the green line went inwards towards the white, and I want it to go outwards, and you can't just drag it manually, unfortunately. So what I'll actually do is I'll press A on my keyboard a couple of times to select a toggle selection, to select all of my node points, and under mask I'm going to switch the direction. This actually threw me for a loop. I couldn't figure out why. Sometimes when I drew a mask, the feather, the green line that I got by holding Shift and dragging out from the line, went inwards, and sometimes it went outwards, and when it's inwards it doesn't work. So under mask, with it selected, you can go to switch direction, and there we go. And so now you can see over here, if I press, is it Shift V? Yes, or it's Alt V, pardon me. And then Alt Pan. You can see I have a feather now, and you can actually drag the feather points, which correspond to the points that you made in your mask, around. So your feather could actually be not at all in some parts, or much larger in other parts, which is really nice. So I'm going to play around with this a little bit. I don't see my image anymore, so what I'll do is I'll press N on my keyboard to bring up that side panel again, the properties panel, and I'll turn off overlay display so I can actually see where I'm putting these things. One thing you can do is under the active spline section, this is where you can say you'll be able to control these funny parts when the mask line is out. It kind of will overlap itself, so you can check on self intersection check, and that will, as you can see, it kind of stops it from kind of doing those funny things, and it cuts off some of the parts, but it still behaves a little bit erratically, I find. So just know that. And I'm seeing my result over here. What I might want to do is I'm trying to make it as transparent or small. There we go. That's a pretty good result. I'm not seeing as much problem right there. You'll have to play around with whatever footage that you have to see if you can get a perfect edge between your two takes. And what I'll do is I'll make the rest of it quite feathered so that you can't tell. I have to make sure if I hold Alt and Pan that I'm not cutting off my knee there at all, because when I make that feather too big, you can see I'm making my knee transparent. So I'll make that actually not have a gradient much at all, except maybe right there. And I'll move that one over so it looks like my shadow. There we go. That's actually quite a good result, I think. If I had included the part of the video where I sat down in both cases, it would have mean I would have to maybe animate this mask, and we're not going to get to animating masks in this video. Okay, I think I have a pretty good result. Let's go ahead and do a test render. I'm actually going to save this file, so I'll go to File, Save, and I'll save this onto my desktop as 003 for this video, split screen 001. That's version 1 of tutorial number 3. And great, let's go ahead and try a render. So I'll click on a render, and I'll press Control arrow up, or the up arrow, to maximize that window. Control up arrow will also minimize or bring back all of your windows. You can actually make any window full screen by putting your mouse in it and pressing Control up arrow on your keyboard, or Control up arrow again to bring it back to its normal view. So there's our result. I'm actually really happy with that. I somehow got, just by getting lucky and positioning the points and the feather in the right spot, you cannot see the edge at all. There is a kind of a shadow here, but that actually was there in real life. It's a shadow from this cord. It's a cord in real life. I didn't add it there for my split screen at all. It runs up to a projector above the couch. Okay, let's go ahead and do our final render. So I'll press Escape on my keyboard, and I'll press Control up arrow to get my windows back. I'm going to change my output type from PNG to H.264, and I'll change my encoding from AVI to MPEG-4, and my output will not be just to a temp folder, it'll be to my desktop, and I'm going to call this split screen final, and I'll press enter. This bottom line, of course, is what your file name will be, and this is where you're saving to. I'm just saving to my desktop, and I will make sure I've saved, and I will press animation to render that out. I need to actually first, though, change the timeline length. I don't remember how long it was, but I can scrub through until and use my arrow keys. There we go. It's at 541, and I'll press E with my mouse here, and that'll reset the end point. It's right there. E resets the end point again, and I believe S starts sets the start point. All right, let's go ahead and save this. And actually what I'll do before I render out my animation is I'll do a little bit of digital color grading, because it's at this point I'll press V on my keyboard to zoom out, and I'll make this window smaller. Actually, I noticed that depending on where I am in my movie, that split screen works really well, but I sit back down and you can kind of see it there, but I'm not going to worry too much about that. I'm going to apply some color grading to my overall scene to really sell the effect, because if they both have the same lighting, it sort of helps sell it. So I'm actually going to insert a few color adjusting nodes. Actually, I'll just insert a color RGB Curves node. I'll drag it into one of these noodles and connect it up to my composite as well. And with these RGB curves, it's super powerful. Not only can I adjust the brightness and contrast of my scene, like I just have, I can also do it for each individual color channel, red, green, and blue. So if I want to make my scene a little bit less red or more red, and I can go back and adjust my brightness and contrast, or the black and white levels as well. I can make my scene really green. So this is a really, really powerful tool, this curves tool. I'm going to adjust a few things, not that I'm really going to be happy with this. There we go. So I'll go ahead and render that out now, and we'll watch it at the end of this video. Alright, so let's finish rendering. I'll go ahead and put my mouse in this window, and I'll press escape on my keyboard. I'll do a quick save. I can quit Blender at this point, and on my desktop is the video file. Let's go ahead and check it out. So the split screen is pretty convincing. I'm pretty happy with the result, except for that little tiny error because of the couch cushion, but I think it's pretty good, and you can see its application for movie making. It's not just used for putting a clone of yourself on the screen. You can actually use a split screen effect to combine different takes with two different actors on the screen. Let's say one actor does one really good performance in a take, but the other actor's performance wasn't as good in that same take. Well, you could use a split screen if you have a static camera to combine the two different takes of the different actors together into the same shot, and even adjust the timing. But that'll be it for this video. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks. Bye-bye.